The Raw Truth is brought to you by KMK Productions and Entertainment. The Raw Truth, where practical minds meet for practical dialogue.
Okay, good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Raw Truth. And of course, we have quite a very interesting episode coming up for you tonight. I have been observing what is happening here in the BVI, and I think it is interesting for me to note that we have been experiencing a spike in the number of COVID-19 cases in this territory, and the problem we're having is the fact that one wonders, after coming from 0 cases in quotes to a place now where we have 38 cases positive COVID-19 in the territory. What exactly is happening? And one may ask, is it that when we say we are COVID-free, because now we all realize that everywhere around us you have COVID-19 every place. To say one is COVID-free would be absolutely nonsensical, because there is always the possibility that it will be infiltrating from someplace. The fact that St. Thomas is next door to us, and St. Thomas has, today I checked, over 220 positive cases in that country, means that one should never take for granted the fact that the borders are technically a stone throw away from St. Thomas, and all kind of dinghies are all over the place. Dinghies could be kept busy to bring people in from St. Thomas into the BVI. It's an age-old problem, but we tend to be pretending it is not happening. Yes, and it's a very sweet way to mess up the what I call the COVID-less status quo, to the point where now we have maybe over 38. Maybe we need to multiply that by 10, because to every case you have to assume that we have at least 10 other people infected. Quite an interesting situation. I hope we get to a place where we will be able to manage the disease in a way that makes sense. I hope our premier will continue the contact tracing. That is the only way, and I hope to God they do not lock down the country again. It happened a couple months ago, earlier in the year. It messed up the economy beyond recognition. I'm not sure we understand how nasty this thing is destroying the countries across the Caribbean region. Now we are at the point where it seems that the premier might be thinking again, thinking of locking down the country. I hope to God it doesn't happen, because he always says we have to learn to live with COVID-19. And locking down a country is a foolish thing to do in the 21st century, especially given the fact that people will be absolutely 100% impoverished by the destruction of the small business sector. Yes, critical. And if you don't have a small business sector in any country, you have no economy, because the small business sector is what is driving the economy in any country. Rather, we should be trying to build the small business community rather than locking down the country to destroy it. And then when people start thieving and ripping down people's place and shooting people and all kinds of garbage because they are hungry, what are you going to say? You're going to blame expats again for all this crookery? Expats are on their way out. Let me tell you this. I think they have had enough. They feel insulted and degraded. And they are on their way out. Yes? So I'm wondering who are we going to blame in the BVI when things get to the place where people start ripping down people's houses and thieving people things anywhere them see it. This morning I was in the Carrot Bay area and a woman said to me, what are we going to do if they lock down the place? We don't have any work and we don't have any money, and if they lock it down again, how are we going to find food? This is the concern. I hope whoever in the BVI is listening to this in government, you better take note of the serious implication of this madness called COVID-19. Because if we're not strategic in relating to this madness, we're going to not only destroy ourselves, but destroy other people as a result. We must live with it. Let's wake up to that fact. Put your mask on, wash your hand, whatever you got to do if that's the case. We have to live with it. You must have it. It's not going anywhere. People are going to catch it. It is going to be everywhere. Get used to it. But locking down a country is not an option. Yes? So if we want to impoverish our countries and destroy our economies and ruin people's lives, then go ahead and shut it down every 5 months. You can lock down the country if you want to do it. It will shock you, the nastiness that we will create as a result of this madness. Yes? I had to put that in because I'm not sure if we understand how serious this matter can get if we are not strategically inclined to managing this with a sense of purpose, with some common sense. You can't listen to WHO and CDC. They don't care about you as a black man. Let me put that in quotes. The CDC and the WHO and Bill Gates and all of them are concerned about the billions they will make from vaccines. That's what they're concerned about. Not your economy as a black man. They don't care about you. They don't care about their own white people, much less you as a black person. Will they be giving you millions to sustain your economy? Hell no. So you better make sure you sustain yours. I'm saying this to all our governments across the Caribbean region. All right, good. I have online with me tonight, as usual, Miss Luzette King. Let me behave myself. I don't like to go on bad. Miss King, tell me I behave bad sometime. Miss King.
Yes, sir. Yes,
how you doing?
This evening. Doing good, doing good. I'm happy to have a guest that is, how shall I put it, unusual in the sense that you don't get people talking openly about the topic we're about to embark on.
Yes,
this
I'm
evening.
sure. Yes, indeed.
And her name is Juanita Headley.
Yes.
She is a lawyer, an author, and her experience as a child is what she's going to talk to us about. And the aim is to, sensitize our community a bit more. But before we go any further, let's try and introduce her. Let's try and introduce her by way of a video, which she would recognize, and then we will ask a few more questions and get into the discussion about the book she's written, why she's written it. Good evening, Juanita, how are you?
Good evening. I'm amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. We are delighted, and I'm sure our listeners would be delighted as well. But before you say anything else, let's introduce you by way of your own words to the audience.
The Raw Truth is brought to you by KMK Productions and Entertainment. The Raw Truth, where practical minds meet for practical dialogue.
My name is Juanita Headley. I'm a New York attorney, originally from England, who is in Trinidad and Tobago, sharing on the issues of human trafficking, child sexual abuse, and exploitation. What's the reason that I'm here to bring this message, which may be perceived as a message of hopelessness? It's because I was the unfortunate victim of childhood sexual abuse from the age of 4 to 10 by my mother's first husband. As a result of what I went through, it dictated the course of my life. And instead of being bitter and being angry, I decided to do something productive. Therefore, I travel throughout Trinidad and Tobago and in other parts of the world, educating and empowering people on the issue of trafficking, which has a lot of links with childhood sexual abuse. For me personally, what I went through, it dictated the course of my life. And even though I'm now doing what I'm doing and I love it, there are still some things that are a struggle for me. And there are individuals right now who have been through abuse and maybe have insomnia, low self-esteem, insecurity. They struggle with these things as a result of what they went through. My desire is to bring hope into those people's world, to inspire them that your past does not have to dictate your future. At the end of the day, you can achieve and aspire to do anything you want to do, regardless of your circumstances. I believe in people, and I believe that the Lord believes in you too. My faith in Jesus Christ is the reason why I do what I do. I've been an attorney for 4 years. I've been volunteering for 6. I'm a volunteer attorney who just loves to serve people. If you know of opportunities for me to speak or to share on this issue anywhere in the world, if you just want to talk, if you want to reach out to me, please do. My Facebook is Changing Cases. My website is changingcases.org.
The Raw Truth is brought to you by KMK Productions and Entertainment. The Raw Truth, where practical minds meet for practical dialogue.
Okay, and let me welcome you back to the Raw Truth. We have Miss Luzette King and a special guest on the line tonight, and we will be dealing with maybe a very unusual topic. It's a topic which we perhaps do not, maybe some of us may not want to talk about, but it's a very practical thing we have been dodging for a while. You look at what is happening in the Caribbean region, you look at what has been happening in the lives of many families across the world. And we find a lot of rape happening, incest happening, human trafficking happening. And we sweep it under the rug and pretend it's not happening. And when the day is done, our young people are suffering. Our children are growing up with scars, deep wounds, which no one would understand. And even though sometimes they try to alert you parents, and I'm being specific to parents because sometimes we don't take the time to listen to our children. Parents, if you don't want to kill the generation you are raising, make the time to listen to your children. You can't be raising girl picnic and think they are all Hulk and Samson and they can defend and protect themselves, and you never stop to strike up an argument with them and find out, how are you coping? How are you dealing with boys? Are you having any problem emotionally or sexually? Ask them these problems. Don't be afraid to talk to your girl, picking them. And boys as well are being exploited and we don't have a clue. Now, let me get back to Miss King because I don't want to go off on a limb here. It's a very serious matter. And we have not been making the time to find out from our children exactly what they have been experiencing. I think it's very sad that we have allowed, in many cases, this to get to the point where we have it at this point. Ms. King, talk with us.
Yes, sir. Juanita, we haven't heard your voice much. I'm sure you're aware of that video. Are you?
Yes, I am, absolutely.
Great. How long ago was this done? You said you were in Trinidad and you go all over the world. Tell us something more about your travels.
Most certainly. The video was made around 2 years ago. I've been traveling to Trinidad for the last 5 years. I usually go there around January and February prior to Carnival for a number of reasons. What people may not realize, when you have Super Bowl, Carnival, large events, prostitution increases, the demand for sex with women and girls goes up, and therefore, for that reason, it makes the most sense to me to go to Trinidad and Tobago prior to Carnival to educate the young people there and to educate the community, particularly as there are a lot of young girls and women who disappear in Trinidad. I'm currently in St. Vincent, which is the 38th country I have traveled to thus far in my young life. I have spent time doing this kind of work, educating and empowering people on abuse and trafficking in Trinidad and Tobago, the United States, the UK, where I am from originally. My parents are Jamaican, I'm English born, India, the Philippines, Indonesia, and Ghana thus far. And I intend to add other countries to that list because trafficking and exploitation and abuse, they are not specific to one specific community, one ethnic origin. It is an issue that affects every one of us. It is an equal opportunity employer, and abuse and even trafficking stems back from the Bible days. In fact, one of the first human trafficking stories in the Bible was Joseph, who was labor trafficked by his brothers.
And talk to us, that you travel and you say why you travel. Talk to us about the book, and maybe that book would give us an idea of what it is you're trying to get across to not only the victims of these crimes, but those people who have to deal with it. What about that book? Is it the first?
The book is indeed my first. The book, titled Can You Keep a Secret, stems out of my own personal story of surviving childhood sexual abuse from the ages of 4 to 10 by my mother's first husband. In addition to my own story and testimony, I provide parents, caregivers, advice and guidance on how to identify if somebody in their world has been sexually abused and exploited. And more importantly, I provide information on how to respond to the disclosure of a secret. What I found from my own personal experience and from talking to other victims and survivors is that we often try to communicate, whether with words or with body language, when we're being abused. When I was a child, I asked my grandfather and my aunts, "Can you keep a secret?" They responded, "It depends." And as a result of that, I was a victim of attempted rape for 6 years of my life. As a result of the abuse that I went through, I suffer from insomnia as a child and even into adulthood. And I believe it's important for us to be educated on this topic because, truth be told, there are a lot of dysfunctional teenagers and adults in the world whose dysfunctions are the result of something that happened 10, 20, 30 years earlier. And therefore, my desire is for people to start to be less judgmental, more empathetical, understanding, and open-minded. When I travel the world, I meet various people, and when I say that I have insomnia, and that means I require to sleep in a room that is completely dark and completely silent, often, 99.9% of the time, I'm advised to drink chamomile tea, Horlicks, Milo, or hot milk. Now, I am vegan and I'm allergic to milk, so that isn't helpful advice. But those things will not solve the problem because it is a lot more deeper rooted. If you are sexually abused during your sleep from 4 to 10, it makes complete sense you'll have sleep issues. Your sleep has been interrupted for 6 years of your life. So although I'm an adult, unfortunately, the effects of that, they traveled into my adulthood and still affect me even today.
So the book would go into detail as to exactly what happened when there was an attempt to rape you?
I wouldn't say details. I'm a born-again Christian, and so therefore I have to be careful about what I write and how I write it. The details of what happened, truth be told, are irrelevant. If I say in my book I was a victim of attempted rape, you can go on the internet, look up the definition of attempted rape, and you'll know what I experienced. Going into specifics is not necessary. If you are able to find the information, the definition of that, you'll understand what I experienced. My sharing of the story is just to allow people to understand why I do what I do, what motivates me, and in a sense to justify why I explain that when the question, "Can you keep a secret?" is asked, that you need to always respond yes. Now, a lot of people over 18 overcomplicate that, and I'll explain why. I heard of a child in the United States, age 7. Now, this young girl, when she came to school, she said, "Daddy is eating my cookie." That was her private parts. Now, let's imagine she'd come up to somebody over 18 and said, "Can you keep a secret?" When that person says it depends, she would not say anything. If we try that again, "Can you keep a secret?" When that person says yes, she would then respond, "Daddy is eating my cookie." And then you would do this. You would say to her, "Because of what you've told me today, I have to break your trust and phone the authorities." You do not phone her father and ask, "Are you sexually abusing your daughter?" because he will deny it and hide the evidence. You do not go off and phone the police. The first thing you do after hearing a disclosure, communicate to that child, teenager, young adult or adult, your next steps, and then you take the next steps. Because at the end of the day, every one of us can keep a secret. You're saying yes so that you can hear the secret. Once you've heard it, then you determine what to do. A lot of adults overcomplicate it and try to justify and explain why they would continue to respond, "It depends." As a victim and survivor of abuse, I don't want to hear explanations. For me, having survived abuse for 6 years, I understand the importance of a yes. Think about two adults, co-workers, colleagues, or friends, myself included. When I speak to people who are my peer, I ask them, is it confidential? Or is it going to stay in the room? Is it going to stay between us? Think about for yourself. When we want to say something confidential or private, we often start that conversation, that interaction, by checking the person will not repeat it. Once you've told them whatever it is you want to share, if they run off and tell your business, you would be mad at them, rightfully so. But God forbid you're in an abusive relationship and you tell them, they want to protect you. And so they would communicate to you in words to almost convince you this is the right thing that we need to do. I used to work for Samaritans and Childline. Samaritans is where adults ring up if they're feeling depressed or suicidal. I said to somebody recently in St. Vincent, if a person is suicidal, they will not call the suicide hotline, they will commit suicide. Therefore, in the same way, when a child asks you if you can keep a secret, they want help. It's their indirect way of getting you to hear what they have to say so that they can get the help. It may not make sense on the face of it, but think about it. How many 4-year-olds feel comfortable talking about sex? When a child is told, this is your cookie, it's going to be even more difficult for them to articulate because they're not even comfortable using the correct terminology for their private part.
Can I interrupt here for a minute, please?
Certainly.
You're making some very serious points, and from my time, because I taught for many years at many levels across the world, coming out of Jamaica and traveling across the world, I was privileged to teach in many settings, many classrooms. One of the main problems that I find in schools, and I need to take us to school, because parents do not understand that when you send your children to school, school is not an innocent place, School opens your child to all kinds of evil. Yes, and it is a good thing when you find teachers in schools who are careful to protect the interest of all students in the classroom. Nowadays, it becomes a rare situation. Why? Because many teachers in the classroom are not there to protect people's children. They are there to earn a salary. As a result of that, children now are left on their own, technically, to battle the ills, coming to school, leaving school, sometimes on the very compound at school. The point I want to make is this. Many children are suffering from a lot of things in school. And they can't talk to teachers because they can't trust them. Why? Because many teachers in school, the same thing in churches, to our shame. Same thing. If you ever open your mouth and tell some of these teachers or some of these church leaders your business, it is all over the place.
That is the point. That is a point I'd like to delve into a little bit, Juanita. I heard you say this on Saturday, and the first thing that came to me was Maya Angelou. I forgot the title of the book, but it was something about the cage bird sings. And that was her autobiography about, and I think she was actually raped. And she confided in one of her aunties. And as a result, the story went around, and he was killed. And because of that, she didn't speak a good maybe 9 or so years. I don't know if you're aware of that story, but
I know of her book.
The cage bird sing. Why the cage bird sing or something like that?
I know of it, but I've not read it. Yes.
Right. Okay. You need to read it, because one of the things in small communities especially is that, in other words, how would you deal with it? Having listened to Kenny just now, how would you advise an audience in the Caribbean on this topic, keeping a secret? Would you be able to make a distinction in the cultures, if you know what I mean?
Well, what I would say is, from having spent sufficient time in Trinidad and Tobago, that one of the concerns that individuals have is that their personal information may be shared with others. Now, for me, as a strong believer and strong Christian, I don't believe in advocating paranoia. I believe in wisdom. And as a believer, I'm a born-again Christian, I believe in seeking God in all things, in all instances, because I cannot endorse or unendorse an individual, because each person is imperfect. Hypothetically, and this is a bad example, but hypothetically, you could confide in me, and I may accidentally blurt that out. Now, there's no such thing as an accident, but what I'm saying is that we are humans, we make mistakes, we're imperfect people. Therefore, my responses have to be based on my religious beliefs as a strong Christian. For me, if I was in the Caribbean, if I was in a community in the Caribbean, whether I grew up here or live here, and I had a secret to disclose, I would have to seek first the kingdom, as it says in the Bible, and ask God. I'm new in St. Vincent. I've met a few people, and I have to use discernment and wisdom as to what I say to them and how I say it. Because with small countries, everybody knows everybody. And therefore, it's very difficult for me to be completely transparent about certain things. Because somebody may, let's say that I made a comment about my driver, for example, and I was just sharing to you that my driver was terrible on the roads, and he's your brother. In other words, when it's such a small community, you've got to be very wise as to what you say, so your comments are not misinterpreted, do not offend people, cause confusion or bacchanal. So for me, if I had a secret to disclose, whether child or even adult, I would ask God, and in my experience, God brings people into my life. People sometimes bless me today and curse me tomorrow. Sometimes people may take what I've said and misinterpret it, twist it, and cause confusion. Unfortunately, what can I do about it? Absolutely nothing. But I'm a strong believer that all things that the enemy intended for evil, God intends for good. And so, for example, having been here just over a week, I've met different people, and out of those people I met, there was 2 individuals that I opened up to and told them pretty much everything. Why? Because I felt within my spirit I could do so. If I knew 10 people in St. Vincent, 8 of them know 50% of the story, and the other 2 know everything. Because at the end of the day, for me, I made a decision on the basis of my belief and the discernment that I have. Now, what if I was wrong? What if I've opened up and it wasn't God telling me to talk to them? There's nothing I can do about that. But what I would say is we've got to use wisdom and caution. Because, of course, if you have been a victim, you want the help. You want the help. You do not want gossip and slander.
Who has to have the wisdom? Who has to have the wisdom?
Yeah, but yes,
because
good point.
I'm looking at a child.
That's the point.
You know,
Absolutely.
let me tell you why I want to labor this. You and I are on the same wavelength. We want to get people to accept that this is not normal, it is destructive.
Yes.
And you're a valuable guest because you have traveled 38 countries. And I just want us to share with our audience the differences in the approaches and the way things are looked at culturally and otherwise, if you understand what I'm saying.
Of course.
So I think the question is, obviously it's your experience as a Christian, as a victim, as to what you would have liked somebody to say to you.
Correct.
You needed that help. But I'm trying to get us, not just you, all of us listening, how do we deal with this in a Caribbean setting? And let me tell you why this is important. I can only do this by an example. In St. Vincent, a police came out and said that she was raped. Okay? She went to some lawyers, and the lawyers filed a case, and I don't know how that information got to Trinidad. And the reporters in Trinidad called back to St. Vincent to the person who was accused, who then had a press conference and named her. And I myself witnessed to this day. She just told me, and I don't want to speak a thing, but she's not well right now. And this is since 2008. So she obviously went to the police first of all, and then to her lawyers seeking help. But now she is the villain. If you understand what I'm trying to say. This is the only example I can see right now and where we can have problems. In something like this, I appreciate you saying, you know, you'll be guided by the Spirit. But some people, I mean, if you didn't put it in a Christian way, they would say the sixth sense. Yes. Some people would not even go by the sixth sense.
That's true.
I hope I'm not complicating it too much, but I just want us to help people in this setting as to how to deal with a heinous crime. Juanita, it's terrible.
Well, what I was thinking, I was thinking in relation to the question about how would the child have the wisdom, so to speak. Right. Please recall that I was abused from 4 to 10, and I did use my childlike wisdom to communicate to two family members, my grandfather and my aunt, that I was being abused. Now, I have a mother, a father, I have a grandmother. Those are the family members that I have, and I have other aunts and cousins. I used my wisdom to communicate to two family members. I will say personally, having done this work in the Caribbean with young people under 18, when I communicate to them and give my presentation to children aged 7 and up, I've had 7-year-olds and 10-year-olds give better definitions of a pimp than most adults. In fact, when I ask primary school children to describe what they see in a 6-minute video, they are able to tell me the little girl was sold by her mother for sex by the old man who holds her hand, whereas the parents who watch this, they think the prostituted mother who hands her daughter over to a man, they think that's the child's father or grandfather. And so that's what I find is interesting. So we shouldn't say that, well, adults have the wisdom of the world or the wisdom of the Holy Spirit. Children do not have worldly wisdom. I would say from my experience, I disagree with that, because for me personally, as a child, of course we've all been children, but as a child, I used wisdom as to who I communicated to, because children observe not what comes out of your mouth, but your actions. The Bible says, by their fruit you will know them. Children read things. They watch and observe you. They pay attention to not just what you're saying, but how you're acting and how you're conducting yourself. And think about that 7-year-old in the U.S. When she shared, "Daddy's eating my cookie," there was a reason why she shared, and there's a reason why she shared to that individual person.
But okay, is there anything else you would want to share in terms of? Well, let me ask you a question. Have you been? How many countries have you discussed your experience by way of the book?
I would say that would be Trinidad and Tobago, India, the Philippines, Indonesia, Ghana, St. Vincent, the UK, not per se. I spent some time there, but the book wasn't out. So I would say 7 countries, the US and UK included, but my book was not in print.
And I think that response would beg the question. So when somebody buys the book, because it is important we talk about the work of that book, when somebody buys the book, what should they expect to get from it? What is the message you want them to get?
Quite a few things. The most important thing is how to respond to that question or the variation of the question, can you keep a secret, whether it's a child, a teenager, an adult. When anyone asks that question, I explain in great detail how to respond and the steps to take. I also provide a lot of advice on how to respond to the disclosure, because often when a child discloses, they are often disbelieved or come up against shock, or they come up against a lot of responses and reactions from the person who's hearing, because often it is somebody that they know. It is not stranger danger. And then beyond that, my desire is to get people to identify victims of abuse so they can get the help, the healing, the counseling, the therapy that they need. And in addition, my desire is for people to be more open-minded and less judgmental. If a woman or a young girl is pregnant outside of marriage, instead of judging that person, we should ask ourselves mentally, who is the father? When we see a lady standing on a street corner selling her body, we should ask ourselves why. When we hear of young boys who are promiscuous in school, ask ourselves why. When we see somebody with an eating disorder who's obese, ask ourselves why. Because at the end of the day, there is a root cause to every single behavior that is exhibited. When somebody has insomnia, low self-esteem, runs away from home, somebody who is promiscuous, a person uncomfortable with their body, a person with STDs, my desire is for the world to become less judgmental, more open-minded. Because if we can understand why this boy in Trinidad is getting to school early and having sex in the back of the classroom, if we can understand that, then that means we can help him. Because this young boy was sexually abused by his nanny. And as the Bible rightly says, do not awaken love before it desires. I have heard in St. Vincent of children under the age of 2 with sexually transmitted diseases. Something is wrong with that.
Wow. Wow.
Juanita, let me try and explore another aspect of what I see this heinous crime, or the industry of crime, because I am not sure that we can call it an industry when people are selling others, and we're touching on human trafficking. Not many people see the link between the rape and other sexual abuses. They don't see the link between that and human trafficking. What is your view with relation to the links between those two things?
Well, what I would say when it comes to sexual abuse creates vulnerability. Any form of abuse creates vulnerability. But let's give women or girls the sort of platform for a moment and focus on boys thereafter. With women and girls, a lot of us, because of media, because of peer pressure, we have these insecurities. It's interesting, and I don't understand why, but I've met a lot of survivors of abuse who may look in the mirror and see an ugly person. I don't understand that. There are women and girls I've seen who are absolutely beautiful, but when they look in the mirror, they see an ugly person. There are individuals who, the way that they carry themselves and walk around, you can see that they lack self-belief. You can see that they have no self-confidence. What has happened? Their innocence has been taken away. They have been violated. Now, sometimes on occasion, as a result of being abused, for example, at 5, when you're 10, you become re-victimized, re-abused by possibly another person. Then when you turn teenage, hormones, peer pressure, you may sometimes enter into a relationship, and that relationship becomes sexual. That person leaves the girl or the boy. That's a broken heart. And then when they get older, what may sometimes happen is with a girl, for example, she may feel, well, it was taken for free, so I'm going to empower myself by selling my body, or I will empower myself by sleeping with who I want to sleep with. A lot of women and girls try to validate themselves and find love through sexual relationships and intimate relationships, because as a young child, their understanding of love was very confused. And the reality is, most people do not know what love is. Love is important. Why? Because that abused victim who walks around and her body language shows the insecurity she has, an individual, male or female, may befriend her. If a male befriends her, if he's her age group, he may say that he wants to enter into a romantic relationship with her. That is called Romeo Pimp. They enter into a relationship, and then eventually he will ask her to have sex with one friend to pay the bills, sex with other friends. Eventually he turns her out into prostitution. Other times it's where a girl or a young boy may come into that individual's life, befriend them, invite them to parties, or even sometimes may say to them, you know what, you can make so much money by having sex with this person. The sad reality is a lot of deception is often enshrouded in human trafficking. Smuggling and human trafficking is very closely linked. With human trafficking, quite often it's a false promise of a job, of an opportunity, of entering new lands. And think about it, if you've been abused as a child and then you're offered love, romantic love, and you've been searching for it all along, you open up yourself to this boy who's handsome and has noticed you, and you think you're ugly and not good enough. And unfortunately, when you enter into that relationship with that person, their intention of meeting and grooming you was to utilize your body for the services of sexual exploitation. And in parts of South America, we have men who will meet a woman, date her, groom her, and marry her for the purpose of prostituting her. So in a country like that, you'd have to be very careful as to who you marry, because your husband could indeed be your pimp.
Pimp meaning human trafficking in that term, is it or not?
Well, with regards to the word pimp, I define it simplistically. 2 words, prostitute manager, or sexual salesman, sexual saleswoman. A pimp is a human being. Actually, let me give you a definition given by a 10-year-old in Trinidad. A 10-year-old who gave a better definition than the majority of adults. I quote her, "A pimp is somebody who helps you sell your body." That's what I got from a 10-year-old, and that is spot on.
Wow. Repeat that.
Somebody who helps you sell your body, from a 10-year-old. And I'm saying that because even in St. Vincent, I asked the question, what is the pimp? And to adults, and the responses, a man who sells women, A man who's... No, it could be a man, it could be a woman,
That's
a
right.
transgender, a homosexual, a ladyboy. It could be any human being selling any human being.
But does it have to be selling or exchanging? In other words, does it have to be a financial transaction?
The legal definition does not require financial per se. It can be financial or in kind, some form of benefit. Because, for example, you could be prostituting your body to have a roof over your head. It's still exploitation.
Or a job even?
For example, so let's say because you can't afford to pay your rent, your boyfriend, partner, sugar daddy, whoever he is, says have sex with the landlord, and that is the exchange for the benefit of having a roof over your head.
There are 2 points I want us to explore a little bit. And when you say, you listed all the things that victims might display physically and emotionally, and you're pleading with our audience to not be judgmental. Explain that. Talk to us. Any examples?
Well, for me personally, there was a lady in Tobago who was pregnant. She was outside of marriage. Now, let's assume that she's coming from a devout Christian background. Whatever denomination, it's irrelevant. She's from a devout Christian background. She's unmarried and she's pregnant. I am a Christian. I am human. I am human, as are all of us here listening in and those here in the studio per se. We as people will hear something and create a scenario in our head. We will make assumptions, and on the basis of those assumptions, we may have either a positive or negative response to the information we've received. So, for example, the lady in Tobago is pregnant, devout Christian, unmarried. People who hear that, who are judgmental, will call her promiscuous and will say very negative things about her behind her back and maybe to her face, without realizing that she was pregnant as a result of incest, because even adults can be victims of incest too. What about the young boy I mentioned who was promiscuous, coming to school early and having sex in the back of the classroom? That boy had been sexually abused by his nanny. So when people hear that story of him sleeping with all these girls, they would judge him on the basis of his actions. Another example, a girl in Tobago who was promiscuous. Again, judgments were made about her behavior and her conduct when in fact she had been sexually abused. Another story, a girl age 7, her mom ran away with another man. In her country and culture, that is normal. Mums and dads run away all the time. That's why you have street children. The dad stuck around and he said, this is what dads and daughters do, and he raped her repeatedly. When she came to school, she displayed sexualized behavior. When people saw the sexualized behavior in her, they did not know where it was stemming from. Another girl, 14 years of age, she was pregnant and gave birth. That baby, the baby's father was the baby's grandfather. So if that baby grew up and people asked, what does your dad do? Well, he's in jail for having sex with my mother. My dad is my granddad. People are going to judge, not the granddad dad, but they would judge the 14-year-old and say maybe she was asking for it. Maybe, because unfortunately a lot of blame goes on the victim.
That's right.
What was she doing out late at night? Why did she have on that skirt? Even if a lady, a child, a woman is naked, that does not give the right for anybody to sexually exploit. Let me give another example, which is important. I've traveled the world, and I've stayed with various people who were strangers to me. When I stayed in these homes of strangers, some of them have small children. I was in a home, I won't say what country, the child was maybe 12, female, and she ran out with no clothes on. I am a stranger. Females are also pedophiles in certain circumstances. It is not a male issue. There are females, hear me carefully, in certain circumstances. Because not every female is a pedophile. nor is every male. But with small children, when there are toddlers pulling down their skirt or their pants, often people laugh and find that entertaining or amusing, or say they're just being children. I have never ever found it acceptable for toddlers to pull down their skirt or their pants. I don't find that funny. The question that I have mentally is, who else are they entertaining? Because I know the vast majority of us humans in the world, our parents taught us to undress in private. So when people are laughing at that kind of behavior, you need to stop laughing and assuming, most likely wrongly, they're just being kids. Because I can tell you, with my Jamaican mother who was strict, I could never have pulled down my pants or skirt in public ever.
Well, guess what? I think that's this is a good place to pause. I'm going to take a break, and when we come back, we will be opening the lines to our friends. If you wish to participate, please feel free to call us. I'll be showing you the number from time to time across the screen. I'll be placing it there. So please feel free to call to share. Absolutely a very important and interesting topic as well. Goodness gracious. We come back in a short moment.
The Raw Truth is brought to you by KMK Productions and Entertainment. The Raw Truth, where practical minds meet for practical dialogue.
Okay, welcome back, and I'm Kenny G, and let me welcome all our friends from all over the world, wherever you are. Let me thank you so much for joining us. Please share this with your friends. This is not another topic. This is an absolutely interesting and important topic to share. I think many people, children and adults alike, are at this very moment suffering from either the after effects of rape or incest or some sexual dysfunction. And not because we do not know means that it is not happening, or not because someone did not say this to us means that it is not happening. As a matter of fact, the things that are most quiet among us are most times the things that are most rampant among us. Make a note of that. Please note that we are opening the lines to you. I want you to call via WhatsApp. The number is 1-284-540-4555. That's 1-284-540-4555. You can add this to your contacts and then open your WhatsApp and pull up the whatever you say. For those of us who are not technologically savvy, first of all, you open your phone, you add the number in the first place. And don't feel funny when I say this. Some people are just not phone savvy at all, and that's okay. Let me teach you how to do it. You open your phone, you add the number, then you put, whether you want to put Kenny G or you want to put The Raw Truth or you want to add PSI TV, up to you. Save. Then you go to WhatsApp and type in whatever you entered, whether it was Kenny G or PSI TV or The Raw Truth, and it will jump right up. And then you could probably just, you can dial the number via WhatsApp to participate in the program. All right, I hope that clue helped, because we're now in the technological age. Most of us will have to learn how to get these things done. The thing is, we have been having a very interesting discussion, and I think it is one which we must. It is something that we must stop to consider as we continue to share with our friends. I think I lost my contacts. I think I lost my guest. I hope I haven't. Yes, I really hope I did not. Oh, good. Okay, wonderful. You're talking about technology. It does happen. Good. So wonderful.
Honey.
Oh, yes, good. Wonderful. All right. So please call. Feel free to call to share, because this becomes
Right.
a very important matter, which we need all our friends across the world. You might have something to share. You might have an experience you want to pass on to our listeners. But before you do that, I would like to share this experience I had some years ago. I was traveling from one part of the country to another, and as usual, being the kind-hearted person that I am, I saw a young miss trying to go to school. She was trying to get to school. So I stopped, I picked her up, and on my way into town, of course, that's a student. There's not much to say. Hi, how you doing? Blah, blah. That's it. I'm heading to town, so I'm driving. Yes? And halfway between where I picked up the young lady and getting to school, she pushed her hand under her skirt, lifting the skirt high enough for me to see her thigh. Sitting right across from me in the car, yes? Pulling down the blouse or whatever else she was doing. And I pretended I didn't see. I just pretended I didn't see it at all. And when she realized that I did not acknowledge what she was doing, within about 3 minutes, she went back under the skirt and this time pulled it way up. I mean, way up. And everybody knows that within the mind of every man, you're looking at some nice, soft thighs. Instinctively, as a man, you're going to take note. It's happening before your face. You know what I did? I pretended like I was a blind, deaf man, stupid as hell, and I stepped on the gas.
But you see.
Hold on. I step on the gas, and when I got to the school gate, I don't know how you didn't hear the brake screech. I was so fast to let her off. And until this day, I never stopped again to pick up another schoolgirl. Never.
But you know something? I wouldn't like to respond to that. I would prefer Juanita to respond to what you just said, the story and the use of the word instinct and so on. Juanita, let me hear your take on it before I comment.
Certainly. Can you just remind me, when exactly did he use the terminology instinct? Because that part I didn't actually receive.
Okay. He was saying the way this young lady was behaving, another man could instinctively, looking at these nice thighs and so on, might have been tempted.
Yes.
So the word instinct is what I am a little bit curious about. What would you say to that? How would you respond?
Well, I would say that it's very difficult because the experience that's just been described there is of a young girl who, for whatever reason, felt it was appropriate for her to behave in that way. And that may be because of previous experiences when she'd been given a free ride, sexual activity had taken place. Therefore, her behavior may have been a normal response, because what happens when things happen over time, they become normalized. So, for example, she may have gotten free rides 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, And on every occasion, the male who drove sort of, how do I say this cautiously, sort of enticed her. So therefore, because that had become the normal, then there was the expectation that the driver would respond as other drivers had previously. That is one possibility. Now, of course, I'm not in her head, but I'm saying, rather than label her promiscuous, which is what most people do, let's flip the switch and change the dynamics and consider that on each occasion she'd been given a drop, sexual activity had been engaged in, and that it was not initiated by her. And so therefore it just became normal for her to just be like, here I am. In other words, even if she appeared to be smiling on the outside, on the inside, she was waiting for this to happen and be done with so she could get out of the vehicle. That's what is a possible theory.
Wow.
Now, you see, this thing is beginning to get so serious. And although we're talking about rape and attempted rape, there are other actions that could be put in that category. But let's look at rape, which is not the other categories of sexual, what's the word I want to use? Sexual assault. This is a 2020 rape statistics by the World Population Review. And it says rape is a worldwide problem, given. It is estimated that approximately 35% of women worldwide have experienced some form of sexual assault in their lifetime. In a majority of countries that have data available on rape, note it, those ones that have data on rape report that less than 40% of women who experience sexual violence seek help. Less than 10% seek help from law enforcement. Because many women who experience sexual violence rarely report or come forward about their incidences, exact rape numbers are challenging to report. While many countries have laws against the act of sexual assault and violence, many of them are insufficient, inconsistent, and not systematically enforced. While most people hear about rape and sexual assault against women, men around the world also experience sexual assault, sexual harassment, that is, sexual assault and rape every day. Here another statistic. Women ages 16 to 19 are 4 times more likely to be victims of rape or sexual assault, and female college student ages 18 to 24 are 3 times more likely to experience sexual assault. Transgender people and those with disabilities are twice as likely to be victims of sexual assault or rape. In the United States, 70% rape is committed by someone the victim knows. And, you know, one of the things that come out here for me, and this is why I was asking you about the differences in cultural approaches across the world. It is a worldwide problem that we need to address, and I understand that it could have come from the Bible and what have you, but it is becoming dangerous. We are seeing the effects of these things daily, and you have been giving us so much information about how they exhibit these hurts. And it is people like you who could try to change the mentality. And so when I hear that some men would instinctively see a young woman like Kenny described, I know of some men who would have stopped his car and explore, want to know why this child was doing this.
Oh, Jesus.
Yes or no?
Sorry, is that a question?
Yes.
So are you-
I know of some men who would have stopped the car, see this child as his own, and want to know, why are you doing this? Is that approach?
I would say that I would certainly commend any person who wants to go to the root cause and wants to determine and to uncover why a certain behavior is being exhibited. For me, I believe that is the wiser thing to do than to prejudge and to look at that student as a promiscuous individual who is, in quotes, asking for, as many believe, rather than taking that thought process and considering that this is something she wants. Change the dynamics of your thought process and consider that, in fact, she is the victim. Women who prostitute themselves, in my opinion, they are victims, and the transaction that takes place with customers is paid rape, and those men are rapists. When people see prostituted women on street corners, they judge her and look down upon her and think she likes sex, she thinks it's easy money, she wants a phone. The vast majority of people who believe that have never had an honest and transparent conversation with a prostitute. When this girl is behaving this way,
Yes.
for these men that you're describing to communicate, they are giving her that opportunity to communicate. However, we've got to use caution here, because a lot of times the behaviors we exhibit, we may not know why. Even if she is intelligent and can articulate, she may not fully interpret her behavior as wrong if that is what she has always known, if she'd been a victim all her life. So we have to consider asking questions is good, but you need to consider the way in which you ask the question, because it's important not just to listen with your ears, but with your eyes.
Let me say this. Can I butt in here? Because I'm listening to you carefully. And if you're talking about an adult to a school child, for example, which listen, in the BVI where we are, or in the Virgin Islands where we are, if you ever make the mistake to interact with a young woman, especially a school child, in a way that she feels uncomfortable. Now, the trick is, if she wants to, what's the word I'm searching for? If she wants to initiate, whether it's a sexual relationship or she doesn't want to initiate, initiate an attraction, that's one thing. Yeah. But if you ever lose your brain as a mature adult in your community, and you make a pass at that girl, and she reports that to her school teacher, who in turn reports that to the police, who in turn brings that up at social development, you are fried. Now, hold on. I think this, in relation to the point that she made, I would not advise an adult, man to child or woman to child, whether the child is male or female, appropriately in the context as it appears. If this, first of all, I don't think we should pick up school children at all. Because one, you don't know who you're picking up. Two, you could walk into ants' nest, literally. And three, if you should find yourself in a situation where the child opens himself or herself to you, and you ever make a wrong move, you could end up in jail for the rest of your life.
Yeah, but here it is. This report that I've been reading, they actually gave the top 10, and thank God that Tim Vincent is off of it. Because at one time we were the top 5. But here they are. Of every 100,000 people, South Africa has a rate of 132.4. Botswana, 19.9. Lesotho, 82.7. Swaziland, 77.5. Bermuda, 67.3. They always feature a theme. Sweden, 63.5. They too always feature. They've come down a bit from, I think, number 1. Costa Rica, 36.7. Nicaragua, 31.6. And at 30.6, is Grenada. Now, I commend people like Juanita to take to the streets, as it were, to try to address this, because that same report is acknowledging that the legislative arrangements don't always work, and I know it doesn't work in St. Vincent. And they're saying that many countries with these high rape statistics need to look beyond just legislation to fix the problem. These countries need to look at deep, systematic dysfunction, this is what Juanita is talking about, of their cultures and social norms that have not prevented and do not prevent sexual violence. And Juanita, I hope you see the reason why I was trying to look at whether there's a distinction in the cultures. Because this is a problem that we need to deal with.
Yes.
You understand the point I'm making, Juanita?
Certainly, but I just wanted to reiterate so that there's no confusion, because the point that I was making in relation to your previous question, when those men ask the girls why they're behaving that way, as I was trying to explain, it's useful not just to listen with your ears, but with your eyes. Because the point is, when you ask a person a question, they may say one thing, but their body language is saying other. Because I'm not saying that these men, so I want to be clear, were engaging in sexual activity. That was not your question, and that was not my response. My response was, if this child enters into the vehicle and that man decides to engage in interaction, which is verbal, to uncover why she is behaving that way, not to engage. It is a conversation. Why are you doing that?
That's what I meant.
Exactly, because I noticed Kenny's response was very different from what I was trying to say. And sometimes viewers misinterpret, so I want to be clear here. The young girl enters the vehicle. The man does not engage. I'll say it again, does not engage, but he wants to understand the behavior. He discusses with her. And often when we behave certain ways, we don't know why. So she might just say, I like sex, for example, when in fact, it's because she has been groomed, almost programmed, to know that this in her mind is normal. So even though you may be hearing the words come out of her mouth, the insecurity that she's displaying, the low self-esteem she's displaying would reveal to that man, if he understands this, there's something more than what meets the eye. So I wanted to make that clear.
You know, but on the other hand, though, I'm glad we're having this conversation, because I need to pick up something that Kenny said, that we must open up. I am sure that there are times when young girls didn't get what they want, because they become, to me, my experience, they become very manipulative, having their way. And there could be a chance that Kenny might have ignored her, but then, depending on where he left her, she might then go and tell somebody that Kenny interfered with her when he didn't. That too is a problem. And he says, leave them on the street. Don't pick them up. But sometimes you could be leaving them to further problem. I mean, this thing is so mixed up. Honestly, what I believe should happen is more conversations as we're having here, especially in the Caribbean.
Yes.
More conversations that we as a society, we attempt to be at one. You understand what I'm trying to say,
But
Juanita?
Miss King, hold on.
One minute.
Can I say this, please?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because listen, parents ought to be blamed for this madness, you know.
No.
Hold on. I'm making a point. Let me make my point. I have seen in many cases where parents culture their girls, especially.
But
hold on, no, mommy, man. Hold on, no.
Kenny,
I want to make a point.
go ahead. Make it and let me hear it.
Mothers culture their girls, and especially in the Caribbean region. If the man no have nothing, don't deal with him.
Yes.
I'm getting a call here, right?
But you see,
hold on, no, Miss King. Let me make the point. Mothers culture girls. I'm asking the caller to hold for a minute. Mothers culture girls. If the man no have nothing, don't deal with them. Therefore, if a girl see a man with a couple dollars in his pocket, or him have a car, or him have a house, he becomes a prime target. Now, how is he going to woo him into being with her? She's going to dress nicely, use her body, lift up her frock, whatever she thinks is going to attract the man. And this is where many people get into trouble as a result of these situations.
But I would like to emphasize the point that Juanita has been saying in almost every sentence of her presentation this evening.
Yes.
You do not blame the victims, number one. You do not, what's the word she kept using? Oh gosh, what's the word you keep using when people start to make judgment? You do not make judgment. Because you don't know what the mother went through to think that way. You know? And so this is why I was jumping in to say, no.
But my question is this. Who is going to, this is my question. And let's have a real conversation. We have a caller on the line, and it will be very interesting to hear what our caller is saying.
Good.
But
yes,
who will be responsible? Who is going to be responsible for raising these children and for whatever happens to them? Who is going to be responsible? Let me take the call. Let me take this call. Good evening, caller.
Hey, good evening. How are you?
We're here trashing out the topic, sir. Talk with us.
Okay.
What is your take on it?
Good night, Lizette. Good night, what's the lady, Juanita.
Is
I
this
just want to ask the lady there, Miss Headley.
Gosh, we can hardly hear him, though. Kenny?
Yes, he's there. He's there.
It's breaking up. But anyway, let me ask a question. In her sojourn around the world, I heard her say she went to about 38 countries. Miss Headley, do you think you're making a difference? Are you seeing any fruits from the labor that you're giving in terms of trying to make a difference? Do you feel that you are doing something that is very and truly making a breakthrough in trying to see if you could help to at least, not alleviate, but at least make a dent in these atrocities that are being perpetrated against young people? That's what I want to ask.
Did you get that, Juanita?
I believe the question was, am I making a difference? Am I seeing the fruits of my labor?
Go ahead, yes.
From what I could hear, that is what I understood the question to be.
You're right.
Well, there was other things he said I couldn't hear very well, but what I would say is I've been doing this work for over a decade, but for 5 years I've been a public speaker. One thing I will say is that when I speak, no matter where I go and I give my message, I have victims and survivors, boys and girls, men and women who come up to me, confide in me for the very first time in their entire lives they've been a victim of abuse. As a result of that confession, there are many occasions where I'm able to direct them on to get support, or in other instances where I'm able to support them. I've had a survivor tell me, because of the support you gave me, I did not commit suicide. I had another survivor tell me, thank you so much, Ms. Headley, for what you said to me. I spoke to my father. I disclosed that I was abused, and we now have a strong relationship. I'm getting support. Even on Saturday, I spoke on Nice Radio right here in St. Vincent, And when I shared my message, somebody outside of St. Vincent, who I know personally, listened into the program. And as a result of listening to the program, they, for the first time, identified as being a victim of human trafficking. I had somebody else who listened into the program, who has met me face to face. I don't know who they are. They've met me face to face. Having heard me on the program, they confided in me they were a victim of abuse. I was able to refer them onto a counselor. They are now being supported. Therefore, I would say even just being in St. Vincent, 2 people are now being supported by a counselor that I know as a result of me being on the airwaves. I know that I'm making a difference. I've had parents who no longer walk around naked in front of their children. I have parents who no longer bath their son and daughter together in the same bath. I do not advocate paranoia, not whatsoever. My desire is to empower people to take the right steps to protect and safeguard their children. The Bible says people perish for lack of knowledge. There are some people who hear my message and become paranoid. As a strong Christian who lives with strangers, I do not have paranoia. I have faith in God. But I believe it's important for us to have worldly wisdom so that we know what to do. One of the greatest successes for me is when I walk into a room and I give my presentation, and at the end of it, the entire room responds yes to the question, can you keep a secret? But what is better than that is when I return a year later, 6 months later, to that same venue, and the people still respond yes. What's great too is when I go into schools, I speak 1 class or 2 classes, I come back a week or a few days later, and other students are able to respond correctly to the questions because they have been told by their peers. So I know my message is making an impact, and I know that for many people, it is the first time they're actually having the freedom to speak about what they have been through to somebody who understands and is not going to judge them. A lot of us have shame and guilt and blame, even though we're victims. When I can stand up in front of them and say, I am a victim, I will not judge you, I have my own issues and insecurities, those people see and hear my transparency. They see that I'm an authentic, genuine human being. They open up. I'm talking about grown men who have not even told their spouses, confiding me in multiple countries around the world. And having somebody they can open up to and speak to freely who understands is an amazing thing for them, and it's amazing for me because I know that I can encourage and help to empower them to have a healthy and whole life by giving them advice and guidance on how to overcome their experience. As the Bible says, we have overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Unfortunately, my story will not be the first or the last, but I can empower people with my experience, with my story, so that way they can make decisions to protect others, and if they've been abused, so that they can have a more healthy and whole life by getting the help that they need.
Right. Tell me something. At what age were you when you decided, I am going to do something about this, and, you know, to set foot on the path of empowering victims of this type? What age were you?
I wouldn't say what age I was, and why is that? Well, my birthday was on Thursday, and it was 6 years ago. Yeah, Thursday was my birthday. Wow. I turned 16 plus. But 6 years ago is when I was invited to speak at a judges conference, U.S. judges. I was invited as a speaker in Tobago. As a result of my financial and economic circumstances, in other words, I work full-time, unpaid as a volunteer, surviving on donations, I asked some friends, or acquaintances to be exact, if they knew of anywhere I could stay with no charge. They said, I have a guest house, a connection to a guest house in Trinidad. You can stay for free in the guest house in return for speaking on this message. Before I came to Tobago, five years ago now, so January come will be 6 years. Before I came to Tobago, I had never ever spoken on this topic publicly. I had done radio interviews that were pre-recorded in New York, but I'd never publicly spoken. In fact, the year before, I was doing a program for speakers to come and discuss the topic. They mistakenly put my name on the flyer and I was kicking and screaming and saying I'm not a speaker, and here we are today. So 5 years ago, I spoke for the first time, and after that, I went back a week later, and I've been going back ever since. I will say, in the spirit of transparency, during my first trip, I was at a school, and during my presentation, a lady came up to me and said, "You should tell your story." I've never told my story before, ever, but she said, "You should tell your story." So I told my story that I was abused. At the end, a young girl was crying. She came up to me. She cried. I cried. We hugged. The point is, from that day forward, I told my story. Let's say I was in Trinidad for 2 weeks on trip number 1. For the first week, that's 5 days, Monday to Friday, I did not share my story. Week 2, somebody told me, share your story. I did, and I believe that means by doing so, it has elevated the presentation I give because it shows who I am, that transparency, that vulnerability, and that is how I connect with my audience. When I tell people in a church community, in a church building, even though you are strong believers, even though you read the Bible, even though you're married, and you know the scripture, the marriage bed is not defiled, I discourage you from creating pornography with your husband or wife. When I say that in a church community, they may not take it that seriously because of the scripture, the marriage bed is not defiled. But when I can hold up my hand and tell them that when I was 15 years old, my mother's husband, the first one, because she's remarried, the first husband that she was married to, he showed me a video of himself and my mother having sex, and he showed me that to groom me for sex, because the abuse stopped at 10, but it didn't stop at 10, it paused. At 15, he showed me a pornographic video of my mother and him together. When I can be transparent and say that story, people will take my advice more seriously, and that is why I tell people what I have been through. It is necessary. It is necessary. But I didn't choose this life. As you heard, I got invited as a speaker. I then enjoyed what I did, and the rest is history. But I did not choose it. I believe God brought me to Tobago. Whether you believe in God or not, I believe he brought me there and opened up a platform for me to speak, and I love what I do, and I wish I could do it full time.
Let me say this. I need to, Miss King.
1 minute.
Miss King. Let me interject here to say this to our guest, because I don't want it to be misunderstood or even downplayed in any sense. Because I think she has to be an absolutely brave woman to not only make the decision to share her experience, but to travel the world doing the same to help people across the world who have been affected. It takes bravery, it takes a big heart for people, and it also demands of her a lot of strength to stand here on this platform tonight to defend the cause of the abused. I commend you. I commend you. Yes?
Thank you. Thank you.
The point I wanted to raise here is that, did you ask your mom permission, or you just did it, and how does she feel about it now?
Well, if you recall, that first week I didn't mention. The second week I was advised to, and I followed the advice I was given. What I will say, though, is when I began sharing, I always shared my mother's first husband. Now, he's deceased. In the eyes of the law, LAW, justice was never served. But whenever I speak, I am clear. My mother's first husband, number 1. I will also point out that having done this ministry for 5 years, I believe it was year number 2 when I communicated to my mother and I told her, I'm going to start to, I don't remember how I said it. I was evasive, but I said, I'm going to start being more detailed. I don't remember what words I used, but I was vague. Because the point is, I knew I need to talk about the pornographic video. I knew that that is what I need to do. I didn't do it straight away. It was about a year, but it is a necessary message. With the fact that we use internet, video chat, and the rest, it is a necessary message. What I will say is that my mother doesn't appreciate me speaking, but that's not the issue. The issue is my book. According to my mother, and I quote her, one of her friends feels sorry for her. That's what she told me. One of her friends has been reading my book, rings my mother every day because she feels sorry for her. I'm confused by that because I was the victim, subjected to attempted rape for 6 years,
Yes.
had insomnia as an adult, had a lot of insecurities as a child, a lot of dysfunctions. According to my family, I'm screwed up in the head, and her friends feel sorry for her. Something is wrong there. My book, as a believer, had to be written in a way that would not be a black book. I could not destroy my family in that book because God wouldn't honor it. So I was very careful how I wrote certain things. There's a certain story I wrote in the book. Now, let's say it was a story about my great aunt. I haven't got a great aunt, but for example, everybody who reads the book would have no idea it is my great aunt, only she would know. So I was very careful how I wrote the book because I'm not trying to destroy people. I'm using the book to educate, empower, and edify.
Makes sense.
But
Yes.
regardless
Yes.
of that, my
Yes.
mother has issue because I state the truth. I am frank and direct, and I say it as it is, and I state the truth. Before I was Christian, I hated my mother. I'm being real with you. Why? She is Jamaican and did not spare the rod. She was very strict and used corporal punishment. As a result of that, my stepfather was my best friend because I was groomed. He gave me candy, let me stay up late, special privileges. I was abused during my sleep. That means there was no conversation between us. It was like two different people. You understand? And so with all that I went through, a lot of people cannot really get their head around the fact that my stepfather was my best friend, but grooming is a type of brainwashing. When you have a strict mother, it's very easy to be abused when someone in your world is not strict. It's that simple. And so because of the challenges that I've had with my mother as a child into adulthood, I wrote the book expressing myself. As a child and young adult, I felt rejected and abandoned. My mother is remarried. When she remarried, I still felt the abandonment and the rejection. Although I have been around before the second husband, I have always felt like I'm third place or fourth place and I'm an only child. When people say only children are spoiled, that really annoys me because that is not always the case. Often we get forgotten about because we're the only one, or we get neglected, etc. Because of all that I went through, I don't want to be spoiled. All I ever wanted was time, T-I-M-E. That is my love language. My mother was wrapped up as a teacher in her schoolwork. The abuse happened when she was in the house downstairs that she didn't know because she was on the phone. A person would ring who speaks a lot. She'd be wrapped up in a phone call. My stepfather would go upstairs, then he'd flush the toilet and come downstairs, so she just thinks he's in the restroom. So because he was very clever, he was an alcoholic, but let me be clear, drinking alcohol, being under the influence of alcohol, does not make you a pedophile. I must be clear, because my mother said it's because he's an alcoholic. Alcohol and drugs has nothing to do with being a pedophile. That is his desire, and his desire came out more because the alcohol gave him the courage to do what he desired already, and that is important.
Let me ask a question more about the book. I heard you say on Saturday that the book was written to raise funds for a particular country. So talk to us about where the book is available throughout and what country you're trying to help and why that country, if you understand what I'm saying.
Certainly. The book, unfortunately, is not yet available on Amazon. I'm writing a book about the book. It is called Behind the Scenes of Can You Keep a Secret? And that book depicts the journey that is not yet over about creating the book and it coming into existence. It took 1 month to write, but I had been through so much traumatic experiences that when that free ebook eventually comes out, people will either laugh or cry, and we're not at the end of the story, because even getting the book on Amazon, I have come up against roadblocks. Despite that, if people would like a copy of my book, they can find out about my book by going on my website, changingcases.org, changingcases.org, contacting me via my Facebook, Changing Cases, my desire is not just to educate and empower people. My desire goes so much further because I have a heart and a love for Asia. India is my favorite country in the world. Why is that? When you come from a dysfunctional like mine, feelings of abandonment, rejection, and blame, especially from your mother, and you go to a place like India where they are community-oriented and embrace you into the fold, for somebody like me, that would be my favorite country. For those of us who have ever been to an establishment run by Indians, it's the entire family who is there. They have that unity. Of course, we know there are negatives such as incest, but let's focus on the positives. Despite that being my favorite country, for females, as many of us know, females, it is not particularly safe in India. My second love, or joint, I'd say, India number one, second love is the Philippines. I speak Filipino, not fluently, but I speak Filipino, desire for fluency, and my plan is to build, number one, bakeries around the world. These bakeries will hire former prostitutes, former homeless people, and ex-convicts. I believe in John 3:16. I believe in the God of second chances. I believe in prison and jail time. But what many people do not know, in New York, once you commit a felony conviction, you cannot get free healthcare, free housing, or food stamps. You cannot get anything. In my opinion, it is a system set up for the black and brown people to fail. My desire is to enable people around the world who have been incarcerated, who are released, to be able to make an honest living. When you can make an honest living, you're going to stop selling your daughter or son for sex. My desire with my book and my t-shirts, Can You Keep a Secret, is to take 60% of the profits raised and to build safe houses in the Philippines. For 8 years, I have been working around the world unpaid. I've had a book for about a year. Every book that is sold, 60% of profits will be going to charity for building safe houses. Safe houses are for the boys and girls, men and women who have been sexually exploited. Why in the Philippines? Because Philippines is number one sex trafficking. That is why the Philippines. When I go to Ghana or other parts of the world, they say, why not Ghana? I don't have to explain myself to anybody but God, but the answer is simply this. It is number one for cyber sex trafficking. We have children sexually abusing each other. We have parents sexually abusing their kids for a white man in the US, Korea, Australia, who's using the internet and will eventually fly over and rape that child. That is why I am building safe houses. 8 years I've been without a paid job. I've been a lawyer for 5 years. How can an unpaid lawyer build safe houses? It would never happen. Yes, I'd love to have an income, but my desire is to change the world one person at a time, and that is why I'm taking 60% of the profits and putting it to a good cause.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead,
I want
Ms. King.
to ask you,
Yes, sir.
obviously, you're thinking of these safe houses, safe homes. I think you've mentioned the criteria, but what would determine the milieu of the environment, so to speak, of these places? What milieu would you want, and how do you intend to achieve it?
What I would say for me personally is that I was asked a question quite recently with regards to the Philippines, and somebody said to me on air, on radio, where would you build the safe houses? Now, if you think about the name safe house, you can't tell people where the safe house is. The safe house is in a secure location. So for me personally, wherever the safe house is, it's in a place where these individuals are protected. It's a secure place. And we've also got to go one step further and consider, we want to remove them from the environment where they're most at risk. If you're in the Philippines, there's a place called Angeles, Pampanga. In Angeles, there is an airport that has been built there. Now, why do I have issue with the new airport? Because Angeles, Pampanga is the red light district, particularly if you want to have sex with underage children, girls and boys. Therefore, building a safe house in Angeles is very unwise because it's right next to the red light district. It is going to be easier for that victim survivor to escape and go back to their old life. Therefore, the environment needs to be somewhere that is safe, that is away from. When I went to a safe house in the Philippines, it was across the river. In other words, you needed a boat to get to the other side. It was far away from town. And in the UK, the safe houses are often, obviously in a house, but in remote places that you would not suspect. They're on a residential street, but they're not going to be somewhere that would place the individuals at risk of re-entry into exploitation.
Can I say this, please? Because this is another point that must be noted. There are the community of pedophiles and rapists. It tends to gravitate to exactly the place that you outlined a while ago, where you have lots of boys and girls away from the regular population. And if they are put in a position of trust over these children, that becomes a nest for exploitation. Now, I'm not sure how you will be able to choose the right people for this setup, because given what I know, people who are prone to exploit children are the most genuine, the most appealing, the most strategic, and all you can imagine, just to position themselves where our children are. What's your take on it?
Well, from my research, what I have seen, when somebody asked me recently, how can you identify a pedophile? When they asked me, I did not have an answer, and I was interviewed on air. I went away and did my research, because my understanding is a pedophile is anybody. Now, when I ask that question in presentations, anybody is not an answer, because what it means to you is different to me. What I will say is, from the comments you've made, I have read articles about individuals that go to, let's say, Africa, and they go as a volunteer or support worker. They seek out employment with children. But what is a really smart thing to do is to train all staff on identifying pedophilia. Because when you do that training, these pedophiles often self-select out of that position because they know that they will not be able to get away with it. At the end of the day, they go places like Sunday school, etc., where they can move about undetected. What I will say, for me personally, because I do not have a spirit of paranoia or fear, but of a sound mind, I know as a single individual, one day I choose to be married, I know I need discernment of the Holy Spirit to choose a right spouse. I know if I'm blessed to have children, adopted or natural, because I would love to adopt one day, I know I would need discernment as to which nanny or caregiver or caretaker they go to. I would need wisdom in these decisions. In the same way, when it comes to employing people in a safe house, I have to use wisdom of the Holy Spirit. If not, I will hire pedophiles, because you rightly describe them. They're the most charismatic, so-called genuine, so-called, that you will find on the face of this earth. However, because I know that I could not determine that by myself, I would have to allow the Lord to direct me. The non-believers call it gut instinct. The Christians call it Holy Spirit. There are things you can read and observe in a person. As a survivor of abuse, I can read things in individuals. Prostituted women who have been in prostitution can identify men who pick up prostitutes. These men can be respectable individuals eating a meal. These prostituted ladies have a sixth sense. Because of their encounters and experiences, their antenna is alert. Therefore, with myself, I don't have that skill because I was not prostituted, but I can read things in certain people by how they behave. When I ask my audience certain questions, I watch people, not what is coming out of their mouth, their body language. I have this knowledge because of my experiences. There are many who come into my life all the time. Many are married. They may come to support me, but I know instantly they're attracted to me. They may be professional, respectful, and never do or say anything inappropriate, but my spirit is telling me that. I have discernment. I cannot sit there and be paranoid, but I will say Background checks serve their purpose, but when a pedophile has never been caught, a background check is not enough. However, safe houses are fitted with CCTV. That means you can see everything that goes on there. At the end of the day, children need to be safeguarded and protected, and we cannot just say, okay, Juanita will have 20 kids, she'll look after them herself. That is not logical. That is not even sensible, because there's something called burnout. What if I want to have a day off from work? At the end of the day, as a believer, I can only seek God on that, because I would not know. I talk to people, men and women, young and old. I do not tend to get on very well with women. Why? Because I'm frank and direct, and I say it so straight they get offended. I have a lot of men in my life. For all I know, one of those men in my life has done something sexually when they were a child, has looked at something on the internet, has thought about it. The Bible says that we can lust with our eyes, right? The Bible says, as a man thinks, so is he. What if a man has had a sexual thought? Just a thought. According to the Bible, as a man thinks, so is he. If he's had that thought, he's a pedophile. The point I'm making, I associate with people all the time who may have committed certain infractions. I don't know that. I cannot be paranoid, otherwise I would not survive in this world. Remember, women do it too, so you can't hire only women. I've had some sick, depraved stories that break my heart. Very, very depraved. But all I can say, for me, I can only seek God on it, because I, as a human, would screw up. Just being real, I would make wrong choices, and when I don't seek God on decisions, I do screw up. So for me, I'd have to seek counsel, use my wisdom of the world, my understanding of people, my observations of what is being said and what is being demonstrated, ask certain questions to elicit the correct response, and then seek counsel from God. That is all I can do.
Yes. Tell me, where in St. Vincent can we get the book, if there are Vincentians listening right now? Where is
the book is available. The book is available at Games Bookstore. He has two bookstores, the one beside the courthouse. It's available at Games Bookstore. People can find me on Facebook, Changing CASES. My website, changingcases.org. That's changing CASES.org. And my WhatsApp number is 454-1963, 454-1963, or they can Google me, Juanita Headley, Juanita Headley, Headley. You Google me. I'm all on the internet. People can find me that way. Juanita.
Say that more slowly. Juanita, Juanita, yes.
Headley. Head, like the body, head. Headley, Juanita Headley. It's not a W, it's J, it's a Spanish name. People love to tell me how to pronounce my own name in Spanish. Juanita, like Anita, but Ju at the beginning. Juanita Headley. Google me, Facebook, Changing CASES website, changingcases.org, or my number, 454-1693, 454-1693. But like I said, I'm on Google. You can find me that way. That is easier.
Okay, before you wrap up, Miss King, because now we're actually right on the brink of time. Let me ask Miss Headley this question. Here is a young man or a young woman who has listened to this presentation and need to hear you say something to them to help them feel better about themselves. In your closing remark, what would you say?
One thing I would say, which is the most important, your past does not dictate your future. No matter what you may have done or what may have been done to you, that does not dictate the course of your life. I may have been a victim of childhood sexual abuse. I may have failed my exams at school and left at 15 with failing grades. Studied to be a chef, did a law degree, failed my exams as a U.S. lawyer, failed my exams again. I passed on the third attempt. Despite the failing grades, despite the trauma and the abuse, I am now a U.S. attorney. I am not promiscuous. I am not a prostitute. I am not homosexual or transgender. Despite what happened to me, the Lord has taken that and turned it around for good. And so I want to encourage anybody who has survived abuse, you are a survivor. You are no longer a victim. The past never, ever dictates the future. And I think that is important to point out. You are a survivor. The Bible says you have overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony.
Miss King.
She answered my question, which was why law? And what was she doing before? So I get it that she was a chef.
That's right.
She became a lawyer. What is your favorite dish in all of this?
My favorite dish to cook, I would say probably Thai food. I have a huge thing for coconut milk. I love coconut milk, not desiccated or grated coconut. I love coconut milk and I love Asian cuisine. As a vegan, I do not eat animals or animal products, only vegetables. As a vegan, I love a lot of junk food. I love vegan sausage, vegan bacon made from plants, a lot of processed unhealthy food. But I'm a healthy vegan who loves junk food. But I'd say I'd love to cook Thai dishes, Asian influence, and dishes with coconut milk. That is my favorite thing.
Great, great. Well,
Miss King, as we wrap up, where do you go? Talk with us.
I saw you licking your tongue as if you're tasting some of the coconut.
Like,
already.
yeah, man. You tell about the coconut thing. Yes, man.
Right. Honestly, Juanita, I think we got more than what we bargained for this evening.
Thank you.
I'm so delighted that you accepted that impromptu invitation. And I do wish you well. I also make myself available if there's anything you'd want me to do in terms of helping you spread the word. I am here. And I look forward to, I'll try to follow you on your Facebook and everywhere else what you're doing. Very, very grateful. Kenny, thank you. And to all our listeners, especially Patches, and I'm sure Neil is there too. Thank you so much for joining us. Spread the word. Don't know what we're coming with next week, but we'll be here. Thank you. Take care. All the best.
Okay, Miss King and
Yes.
Miss
Headley.
Miss Headley, it's a pleasure having you both today. And of course, take care of yourselves. To all our listeners to this program, share. I'm sure there will be much for our listeners across the world to hear. Many of us have been experiencing some very odd things in life, and sometimes some of us might wonder, why me? Why me? Why do I go through these things? Why does these things why do these things happen? But there is always, in closing, there's always a purpose for the path you find yourself in this life. Nothing happens by chance. And if you understand destiny, every road in life leads to your ultimate destiny. You may not understand it now, but if you check the preparation which has been happening along this path, you will immediately understand that there's a greater purpose for your life. Don't take it lightly. Whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. And in closing, God is not mocked. Whatever you call God, whatsoever a man soweth, the same God will bring it right back to you in the exact form, and you will reap the very seed you sow. Take care. Catch you next Monday.
The Raw Truth is brought to you by KMK Productions and Entertainment. The Raw Truth, where practical minds meet for practical dialogue.